Our number one enemy is ignorance, and I believe that is the number one enemy of everyone, is not understanding what is actually going on in the world. It's only when you start to understand that you can make effective decisions and effective plans. Now, the question is, who is promoting ignorance? Well, those organisations that try to keep things secret, and those organisations which distort true information to make it false or misrepresentative. In this latter category, it is bad media. It really is my opinion that the media in general are so bad, we have to question whether the world wouldn't be better off without them altogether. They're so distortive to how the world actually is, that the result is we see wars and we see corrupt governments continue on. One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars.
my dreams, I walk free in the city streets. 2,500 days plus 50 weeks, doing hard time for these WikiLeaks, trying to bring the truth out. Man, it only gets you heat, and then they gag you. You don't get to speak, and when you get the leak, they try to hit delete. The masters of the masses, they want the shit discreet. That's why my middle finger's up to these sick elites. Free speech, it's the freedom of press. Take your deepest, darkest secrets, never leave them unsaid. If I'm a thief, then I'm a thief for the people you dread. The people up the red, white and blue, you keep them in bed. Seeing the sheep, keep them asleep, deceiving the weak. Keep seeking the leaks till you cease, and I see your defeat until I'm deceased underneath a freezing red sheet. Become a dead man, then I hit the switch and release. When Goldman Sachs is your creditor, you kill the messenger. Stories axed by the editor, you kill the messenger. Pay to play on the regular, you kill the messenger. Need to silence any questioners, you kill the messenger. And outside my window a figure quickly creeps. They dark as night like some motherfucking chimney sweeps. Whiskey with my Mickey keeps dying in my kidneys weak. Silence in my risky tweets is what the grand jury seeks. I'm wanting peace like 7 years in Tibet. Now rest in peace like 7 years under threat. Cause I've released 7 vaults, they upset. They under the right sentence, but the US still insists to rest. I guess it's a sin to take the truth and disseminate. MLK to Gandhi, take aim and eliminate. And I don't say I'm great, just wanna say what's fake. But if they kill me, a million others will take my place. The CIA's post like a knife the sharpest. All hypocrisy, lies, and heartless. They want to stop me, my life make my heart quit. Cause democracy dies in the darkness. When Goldman Sachs is your creditor, you kill the messenger. Stories axed by the editor, you kill the messenger. Pay to play on the regular, you kill the messenger. Need to silence any questioners, you kill the messenger. When the vote count is irregular, you kill the messenger. You caught spying on a senator, you kill the messenger. Removing voters from the register, you kill the messenger. Need to silence any questioners, you kill the messenger. In my dreams, I walk free in the city streets. 2,500 days plus 50 weeks, doing hard time for these WikiLeaks, trying to bring the truth out. Man, it only gets you heat, and then they gag you. You don't get to speak, and when you get the leak, they try to hit delete. The masters of the masses, they want the shit discreet. That's why my middle finger's up to these sick elites. Playing on the regular, you kill the messenger. Free speech is the freedom of press. Take your deepest, darkest secrets, never leave them unsaid. If I'm a thief, then I'm a thief for the people you dread. The people want the red, white and blue, you keep them in bed. Seeking the sheep, keep them asleep, deceiving the weak. Keep seeking the leaks till you cease, and I see your defeat until I'm deceased underneath a freezer red sheet. Become a dead man, then I hit the switch and release. When Goldman Sachs is your creditor, you kill the messenger. Outside my window, a figure quickly creeps. They dark as night like some motherfucking chimney sweeps. Whiskey what my Mickey keeps, dying in my kidneys weak. Silence of my risky tweets, what the grand jury seeks. I'm wanting peace, like 7 years in Tibet. Now rest in peace, like 7 years under threat. Cause I've released 7 vaults, they upset, they ended the rape sentence. But the US still insists to rest. I guess it's a sin to take the truth and disseminate. MLK to Gandhi, take him and eliminate. And I don't say I'm great, just wanna say what's fake. But if they kill me, a million others will take my place. The CIA's post like a knife the sharpest. All hypocrisy, lies, and heartless. They want to stop me, my life make my heart quit. Cause democracy dies in the darkness. Cause democracy dies in the darkness. You kill the messenger. You kill the messenger. Democracy dies in the darkness. Darkness. Feeling cold now, I got the heater on. Feeling sold out, even though I'm keeping strong. But can I hold out when every bit of freedom's gone? They want me rolled out, never to sing freedom song. I wanna see the sky, I wanna feel the rain. But gotta keep away from windows, that's some window pane. It's just a shame, couldn't have planned out all our dreams. Now I scream, cause there's a man in the machine. But the train is off the tracks, and damn it's losing steam. I wanna call Kristinn, I haven't seen since 013. I'm missing life like 3 strikes each night. Seems like 3 nights ain't right. Can't fight, space light, hate life. Wanting to be snake-like, shutting off this gray life. In the dark can't make light, but where I'm headed now is brake lights. Where I'm headed now they brake lights. Counting days like brake lights, feeling weight like brake lights. Had a great life, brake lights, brake lights, brake lights. Out of place like brake lights, in my face like brake lights. Counting days like brake lights, brake lights, brake lights. Sit here asking, what have I done? If these strings were cut, I'd see my son. And if I could just fly from this place, then I'd hold you in my love embrace. And if I could just speak to you now, I'd renew my vow and be in the now. Is this me in denial? Wanna remove stress from your brow and pay you back some way, somehow. But it's painted black, can see the way back now. But how's the house and how's your mom? I doubt the way the media portrays me makes you hate me. But to think you see that daily makes me crazy, that just ain't me.
This is without a doubt going to be this generation's Free Mandela movement. Every single generation must fight again the same battles that previous generations have fought.
Brake lights, counting days like brake lights, brake lights, brake lights, brake lights, brake lights, brake lights. Brake lights, brake lights, brake lights. my dreams, I walk free in the city streets. 2,500 days plus 50 weeks, doing hard time for these WikiLeaks, trying to bring the truth out. Man, it only gets you heat, and then they gag you. You don't get to speak, and when you get the leak, they try to hit delete. The masses of the masses, they want the shit discreet. That's why my middle finger's up to these sick elites. Free speech, it's the freedom of press. Take your deepest, darkest secrets, never leave them unsaid. If I'm a thief, then I'm a thief for the people you dread. The people of the red, white and blue, you keep them in bed. Seeing the sheep, keep them asleep, deceiving the weak. Keep seeking the leaks till you cease, and I see your defeat. Until I'm deceased underneath a freezing red sheet. Become a dead man, then I hit the switch and release. When Goldman Sachs is your creditor, you kill the messenger. Stories axed by the editor, you kill the messenger. Pay to play on the regular, you kill the messenger. Need a solace, any questioners, you kill the messenger. And outside my window a figure quickly creeps. They dark as night like some motherfucking chimney sweeps. Whiskey with my Mickey keeps, dying in my kidneys weak. Silence in my risky tweets is what the grand jury seeks. I'm wanting peace like 7 years in Tibet. Now rest in peace like 7 years under threat. Cause I've released 7 vaults, they upset. They ended the rape sentence, but the US still insists to rest. I guess it's a sin to take the truth and disseminate. MLK to Gandhi, take aim and eliminate. And I don't say I'm great, just wanna say what's fake. But if they kill me, a million others will take my place. The CIA's post like a knife the sharpest. All hypocrisy, lies, and heartless. They want to stop me, my life make my heart quit. Cause democracy dies in the darkness. When Goldman Sachs is your creditor, you kill the messenger. Stories axed by the editor, you kill the messenger. Pay to play on the regular, you kill the messenger. Need a solace, any questioners, you kill the messenger. When the vote count is irregular, you kill the messenger. You caught spying on a senator, you kill the messenger. Removing voters from the register, you kill the messenger. Need a solace, any questioners, you kill the messenger. In my dreams, I walk free in the city streets. 2,500 days plus 50 weeks, doing hard time for these WikiLeaks, trying to bring the truth out. Man, it only gets you heat, and then they gag you. You don't get to speak, and when you get the leak, they try to hit delete. The masses of the masses, they want the shit discreet. That's why my middle finger's up to these sick elites. Playing on the regular, you kill the messenger. Free speech is the freedom of press. Take your deepest, darkest secrets, never leave them unsaid. If I'm a thief, then I'm a thief for the people you dread. The people want the red, white and blue, you keep them in bed. Seeking the sheep, keep them asleep, deceiving the weak. Keep seeking the leaks till you cease, and I see your defeat. Until I'm deceased underneath a freezer red sheet. Become a dead man, then I hit the switch and release. When Goldman Sachs is your creditor, you kill the messenger. Looking outside my window, a figure quickly creeps. They dark as night like some motherfucking chimney sweeps. Whiskey with my Mickey keeps, dying in my kidneys weak. Silence of my risky tweets, what the grand jury seeks. I'm wanting peace, like 7 years in Tibet. Now rest in peace, like 7 years under threat. Cause I've released 7 vaults, they upset, they ended the rape sentence. But the US still insists arrest. I guess it's a sin to take the truth and disseminate. And I'll pay the Gandhi, take him and eliminate. And I don't say I'm great, just wanna say what's fake. But if they kill me, a million others will take my place. The CIA's post like a knife the sharpest. All hypocrisy, lies, and heartless. They want to stop me, my life make my heart quit. Cause democracy dies in the darkness. Cause democracy dies in the darkness. You kill the messenger. You kill the messenger. Democracy dies in the darkness. Feeling cold now, I got the heater on. Feeling sold out, even though I'm keeping strong. But can I hold out when every bit of freedom's gone? They want me rolled out, never to sing freedom song. I wanna see the sky, I wanna feel the rain. But gotta keep away from windows, that's some window pane. It's just a shame, couldn't have planned out all our dreams. Now I scream, cause there's a man in the machine. But the train is off the tracks, and damn, it's losing steam. I wanna call Kristinn, I haven't seen since 013. I'm missing life like 3 strikes each night. Seems like 3 nights ain't right. Can't fight, space light, hate life. Wanting to be snake-like, shedding off this gray life. In the dark can't make light, but where I'm headed now is brake lights. Where I'm headed now they break lights. Counting days like brake lights, feeling weight like brake lights. Had a great life, brake lights, brake lights, brake lights. Out of place like brake lights, in my face like brake lights. Counting days like brake lights, brake lights, brake lights. Sit here asking, what have I done? If these strings were cut, I'd see my son. And if I could just fly from this place, then I'd hold you in my love embrace. And if I could just speak to you now, I'd renew my vow and be in the now. Is this me in denial? Wanna remove stress from your brow and pay you back some way, somehow. But it's painted black, can see the way back now. But how's the house and how's your mom? I doubt the way the media portrays me makes you hate me. But to think you see that daily makes me crazy, that just ain't me.
This is without a doubt going to be this generation's Free Mandela movement. Every single generation must fight again the same battles that previous generations have fought.
Brake lights, counting days like brake lights, brake lights, brake lights, brake lights, brake lights, brake lights. Brake lights, brake lights, brake lights.
Our number one enemy is ignorance. And I believe that is the number one enemy of everyone, is not understanding what is actually going on in the world. It's only when you start to understand that you can make effective decisions and effective plans. Now, the question is, who is promoting ignorance? Well, those organisations that try to keep things secret, and those organisations which distort true information to make it false or misrepresentative. In this latter category, it is bad media. It really is my opinion that the media in general are so bad, we have to question whether the world wouldn't be better off without them altogether. They're so distortive to how the world actually is, that the result is we see wars and we see corrupt governments continue on. One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly, with open eyes, go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
Julian Assange, thank you very much.
Online vigil for Julian Assange. I'm Joe Lauria. I'm the editor-in-chief of Consortium News. And I'm very happy here to be invited by Susie Dawson to kick off this 11-hour vigil or 12-hour vigil. We're going to go until, I think, 11 p.m. Eastern Time. It's 10:30 a.m. here in the Washington, D.C. area. I'm joined by Kathy Vaughan. Welcome. How are you, Kathy?
I'm good. How are you? It's very late here again. It's just after midnight.
And where are you exactly?
I'm in Sydney, Australia.
And it's
although I don't sound like an Aussie. I've got one of those international Kent accents that live in too many countries. But yeah, it's 12:30 in the morning, and it's getting quite warm now. So we're having nice weather. I've been. I suppose you want to ask what I've been up to next.
Well, let me ask you, tell the audience a little bit about yourself. Tell us about yourself, why you're here.
No, they've heard about me 3 times, I think. So, all right, very briefly.
Oh, there are people who've never tuned in before, perhaps.
I just don't like talking about myself all that much. All right, so I'm a Franco-Irish Australian artist living in Sydney, and I have been a WikiLeaks supporter since 2010. And I got involved with people close to WikiLeaks. In fact, Julian Assange's mother was the first person that I met close to WikiLeaks. But I met his father, brother, and started making films in relation to WikiLeaks, and proposed to make a documentary for WikiLeaks. And then back in 2011, it was a cliffhanger every single day. So no time to make a long format documentary. It was kind of everything that came out was news, and it turned into a web series of many different interviews, a bit like the Unity for J thing, except that, I traveled around the world instead of doing this, and met up with, people like, when I went to America, met Noam Chomsky, Daniel Ellsberg, Nozomi Hayase. So I recorded their testimonies. It's a very similar style because it was more like conversation between people who have a common interest in all this, and looking behind the scenes and looking behind the narratives and trying to figure out what's really going on, and also contemplating the benefit of an organization like WikiLeaks with their perfect record of truth-telling. Oh my goodness, that is gold, and that is something that we need to defend, protect. It was obviously causing a lot of trouble to people whose corruption was being exposed, and people in high places. So lots of people in low places, in grassroots places, but at every level, anybody who had skills should stand up and do whatever they can to defend WikiLeaks. So I made an awful lot of films. I made the WikiLeaks tapes, which was a collection of 24 films with people talking from all around the world. And some of it was actual documentary because I had the time, cameo documentaries, let's say, but up to 20 minutes long. And so all of the, people like John Pilger and Kristinn Assange and his father, John Shipton, as well. We were all working together back in 2011 onwards here in Sydney, and trying to do the same thing as we are now, stop Julian from being pushed into a precipice, which once again seems surprisingly near. But I've been trying to figure out what the latest drama is all about, what's been happening in Ecuador over the last few days. So yeah, I don't know if have you heard about that as well? Can
you talk about that? Because we had some news yesterday, supposed news, that the Foreign Minister Jose Valencia Amores said that Julian's status remains the same inside the embassy in London. But really, what does that mean?
Well, I mean, why announce it? Why make such a public international announcement to reaffirm Julian's asylum? Because what they were debating in the Ecuadorian Assembly was not even debating, they were taking a vote on whether to scrutinize the process of giving him citizenship. Now, so whether he keeps his citizenship or not has got nothing to do with whether he remains an asylee. And, the idea, it is the rationale, as WikiLeaks have said it, on October 4th, it is being pushed in order to make him easier to extradite to the US over WikiLeaks publications about the Iraq War, State Department and CIA. Alt 7. Article 79 of the Ecuadorian Constitution forbids extradition of nationals. Once his citizenship is revoked, extradition is easier, but not easy, because you have Ecuador Constitution Article number 41. And this just applies for non-citizens who are applying for citizenship, for asylum, I should say. The state shall respect and guarantee the principle of non-return, right? More technical terms, non-refoulement. In addition to humanitarian and legal emergency assistance. So persons requesting asylum shall not be penalised or prosecuted for remaining in a situation of irregularity. That's Article 41. So Julian is still protected under that. So why should the foreign minister make such a big deal of making this announcement, reaffirming? I suppose it may have been because there was confusion. A lot of people thought that they were voting on whether to revoke his citizenship or not. No, this was just a politician. Her name was Paulo Vintimilla, from the Christian Socialist Party, that had put in a request to the foreign minister a number of times already, but got really quite adamant about it, that they declassify certain documents that were classified by him in relation to the process of giving him citizenship. And we know that a lot of that stuff was very, very private. I am not surprised at all that it was, they had to look at all of the evidence, and a lot of that evidence had not been revealed to the world. So okay, so she's saying that every citizen in Ecuador has the right to see all those documents. That's just rubbish. I mean, that would be a diplomatic issue if all of those documents related with that decision to give him citizenship were revealed. So sorry, I'm kind of getting.
So you're saying even if they revoked his citizenship, wouldn't change his status
as an asylee.
But no, it could still make it easier to extradite him to the U.S. That is key there.
Yeah, that's right. But to open up that dossier, there's probably a lot of things in there that are not intended to be, the basis of him being there. Or maybe it's got something to do with the posts that he was assigned as well. He was given diplomatic status. I don't see why that should be revealed. And even if it is, it doesn't matter. It's not. It may make it easier, because it is going to violate their own constitution. A lot of people would get angry if an Ecuadorian citizen was handed over to persecutors. But they have a basic rule anyway. And the Inter-American Court said that every state that is involved in this should do their best to assure his passage, safe passage, and enjoyment, which is the actual word that is used in relation to asylum, to his destination in Ecuador. So I really don't understand why it was.
Do you know anything about the citizenship law in Ecuador? In other words, they're looking at the process that he became a citizen, whether there are any violations of that. Is there, for example, maybe he had to spend a couple of years or some time inside Ecuador to get citizenship, and he obviously didn't do that. Do you know what exactly they're looking at in terms of the citizenship law?
Well, actually, the Ecuador embassy is
territory.
Ecuador territory. Yeah. Yes. Legally, yes. So he did spend time in Ecuador. He spent 6 years in Ecuador, technically speaking. But I was just technically speaking. So I was also reading Article 66 of the Ecuador Constitution. I've read it all before, but a long time ago, back in 2012, I think. But Article 66 is very interesting. So that's the right to personal well-being. So for the moment, he is still an Ecuador citizen. So he is entitled to bodily, psychological, moral, and sexual safety. There's a lot of other things here, but going down to article number 6 is very significant. The right to voice one's opinion and express one's thinking freely in all its forms and manifestations.
Well, they're violating that, it seems like, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, something else the foreign minister said that I think is curious. He said, and I'm reading from this Sputnik News report, that the issue of Assange must be settled through the direct dialogue between the whistleblower's lawyers, between Assange's lawyers and the authorities of the United Kingdom. So they seem to be, in this sentence, if we could believe this, trying to remove themselves from the whole process. Like, he still has asylum and Ecuador has nothing to do with it. I mean, is that what they're saying?
Well, did they actually use the word whistleblower? Did he use the word?
No, that's the Sputnik writer.
Report.
Yeah, they're not quoting him directly. They're not quoting the foreign minister directly. They're saying that he said that it's up to the Assange's lawyers and the British authorities to determine his status. What does that mean, in your opinion?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, if you go back, Moreno said that he will eventually have to leave. That, well, in one way or another. So I guess that what he's probably saying is, the foreign minister is saying, is that safe passage is being obstructed by British authorities. And because they're going to arrest him, we know why they're going to arrest him, because he needs to be in custody so that a sealed indictment can be opened, so he can be extradited without a prima facie case, so that he can be put in detention forever, without trial, even under the NDAA. So there's just a whole list of things that snowball. But the thing is, it has to be negotiated with British authorities, with his lawyers, by his lawyers. But also, one would think also with his Prime Minister and Australian diplomats. Our Prime Minister could arrange that very quickly and easily. What is it? Bail breach, right? Right. So, yeah, that was while he was seeking asylum. So it is not a crime to seek asylum while you're, under some kind of legal, bail thing for. So you can do that. That's not illegal.
We can interpret that remark then about it's up to the UK authorities and Assange's lawyers to mean that they're ready to expel him. And then it's up to the British authorities to do what they want with him in consultation with Assange's lawyers. I mean, the new foreign secretary said a couple of weeks ago that the British police would have a warm welcome for Julian Assange when he leaves the embassy. So that was a clear indication that they're going to arrest him. So the Ecuadorian foreign minister is saying, okay, it's up to the Brits to determine what they want to do with him. So that doesn't bode very well. It doesn't sound like something to be encouraged by. I think
it was Luke Harding who said that, wasn't it? Luke Harding, the journalist.
No. That was the new foreign secretary.
Oh, was it? Oh, right, okay. Because Luke Harding said something
he's probably said things
very
like
similar.
That,
yeah. Yes,
worse, maybe even worse, Luke Harding. Yeah. And more often, most likely. Tell me about the view from Australia, since you're there. The Prime Minister, the press there, they almost disowned him as a citizen of Australia. That's what it seems like from outside.
Well, look, I don't know if you heard the interview that I did with Kristinn Assange on the 9th of August. But, it's a 34-minute interview, and it's so informative, and it's bloody heartbreaking as well. But, she said the Australian government has done nothing for Julian. And he only received a visit from 2 diplomats from the Australian High Commission. A couple of months ago, Jennifer Robinson, there were photographs taken, and Jennifer Robinson confirmed that was the first time he'd ever had a visit. So
ever?
There was...
Ever?
Yes, ever. But they've done so much worse than that. At the time that all this stuff happened back in 2011, the Prime Minister was Julia Gillard, and Julia Gillard was a former lawyer. Now, Julia Gillard announced just after Cablegate, announced that what he had done was an illegal, irresponsible thing and an illegal thing. And 10 days later, the Australian Federal Police totally shamed her professionally by saying that he hadn't broken any laws at all.
Any Australian laws anyway, right?
Not in this country, yes.
Yeah.
But as it turned out, not in any country. Well, as far as we know, since 2010, for the last 8 years. Now, also at the time, a future Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, who is our former Prime Minister, he was his former professions were barrister and then investment banker with Goldman Sachs. But when he was the barrister, he gave a lecture at the University of Sydney denouncing Julia Gillard for being a lousy lawyer and affirmed that Julian Assange had not broken any laws at all. And also, he said when an Australian citizen is spoken of in this way, indeed threatened in this way, and we're talking about Sarah Palin, we're talking about all of the, assassination incitements back then, an Australian Prime Minister should respond. So he was chastising Gillard for not helping Assange back in 2011, and yet when he became Prime Minister, he didn't do a bloody thing either. It's been, when I was hanging around with some activists back in, I think it was 2012 or 13, we occupied DFAT, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And it was quite an item in the news. But we really wanted some kind of assurance back then that Julian wouldn't be extradited. Otherwise, we weren't going to leave the place. And it was just, it was call security and get them out and just tase them and stuff like that. And we didn't get any answer at all. Don't think that we haven't been active in Australia, trying very hard. There's been enormous amounts that have been done by Australian activists, people like myself as filmmakers, plenty of filmmakers, plenty of people in the street, pretty full-on actions for Julian, especially over a few years, the first few years, and it's coming back now. And, it's like they stick their fingers in their ears and look the other way because, their big brothers are the US and they just don't want to tread on the US's toes. It's been like that for, since the Whitlam government in Australia, which is back in the 70s. We've had, American is very, very difficult allies, because they're like your friends with the school bully, You wouldn't say a word against them because they might suddenly turn on you. Although I don't think that's the case, We're very, very useful. It's a two-way thing. But we have bases in Australia that are supposedly joint military facilities, like Pine Gap. And, the big stink was that our Attorney General, Lionel Murphy, back in the 70s, and he was Attorney General under Gough Whitlam, he tried to go in there. Not allowed. Prime Minister not allowed in there. So it was, it was primarily an American base, and even then, the White House knew much more than what people lived.
Well, what would be the political? What would be the political cost for an Australian politician to stand up to the U.S.? Let's say just on the Julian Assange issue, to tell them back off, let alone the Pine Gap and the U.S. bases and the Five Eyes and all of the pressure and the subordination of Australia, along with much of the rest of the world, to the U.S. Just on the Assange issue, how would the population, the voting population, react in Australia if an Australian politician stood up for Julian Assange?
Such an Australian politician has done so. So we've had Senator Scott Ludlam, and he is no longer a senator because there was this big hoo-ha about where people's grandparents were born, so they inherited a dual citizenship that they didn't even know about. And Scott was brought to Australia at a very, very young age, and he didn't know that he had dual citizenship. So being very honest, he and another senator, Green senator, resigned, which was a great loss. It was a great loss because he was our 21st century senator that understood all this, went to Belmarsh to be with Julian, went to Sweden to try and find out what was going on, do some deals, has spoken out. There's plenty of documentation of Scott Ludlam beautifully defended him, and he's been on the Vigil. Scott Ludlam, look out for Scott Ludlam. He is the Australian politician who really stood up for Julian. And sadly, I feel that the rest of Australian politicians don't even understand the issues, are not across the whole. Probably a lot of them wouldn't even hardly know what Five Eyes are, especially the regional ones. It's not, people don't understand the importance of freedom of information, which I think this is. It's, for Julian's freedom of expression, because that human right is being denied, but it's essentially a freedom of information issue. We have that is a big issue in the world, and that's what WikiLeaks is always. And going right back to Tim Berners-Lee. That's what he wanted with, in giving the internet to the world, that anybody could find out anything they wanted and have a voice,
Now, so it's against the law to be a dual citizen and serve in the Senate in Australia?
Not only the Senate, but just be a member of the government or parliament at all.
And he was a British Australian citizen, is that what it was?
No, New Zealand.
New Zealand.
And Larissa Waters, another one. She was.
They drove him out. They drove him out. You think because he stood up for Assange, they made the opposition or somebody issue of that?
No, he resigned himself. He was informed by a barrister that his status was as a politician was invalid. He didn't have the right to serve in politics.
When did that become an issue? After he spoke up about Assange, or it was unrelated to that?
Way after. It was just last year.
And you don't think it had anything to do with his
defense
of Julian Assange? I see.
No, but I spoke to Scott, and he just after he had his farewell party, and I spoke to him, and he said that he'd seen Julian about 3 weeks before. He dropped in to say hello, but that was nothing to do with the WikiLeaks issue. But look, he had a hell of a time, in the Senate. You had Senator George Brandis, who was introducing the metadata retention bill. So, collecting our digital footprint. And Scott was, in the Senate questioning him. This guy who was organizing this, we had this fun event in Sydney called The Meaning of Metadata, because Senator Brandis didn't even know what metadata was, right? That was very embarrassing for him. So Scott, I organised that, and then Scott was the speaker. He came along. We had a lot of fun taunting Brandis, and then the morning of the event, Brandis just released the bill. He just released the law. It just passed into law, and poor Scott was on television all day and didn't have time to prepare his speech. He got him back, but he, I spoke to Scott privately, and I'm not going to say exactly what he said, but. he was really exhausted from that struggle.
Is there any difference between the Murdoch press and the rest of the Australian media about the way they portray Julian Assange to the public?
I think there is SBS, which is our international TV station. So I've felt their reporting on Julian to be fair, and actually, good information there. I found the ABC to be terrible, which is, you would think that our national broadcaster would be a little bit more fair and balanced. So they're always getting into trouble from the government, which is right wing at the moment, for not being balanced and impartial. Yes, our Prime Minister recently said, I didn't get at them for being biased. I got that the subject was about their impartiality, so it's exactly the same thing. But yeah, so yeah.
It's not good then. The media coverage is not good across the board.
No, and it's gone a bit the other way with the ABC, unfortunately, because they had an interview with Hillary Clinton. She was interviewed by a journalist called Sarah Ferguson just after her book What Happened came out. And in that interview, I think that might have been the first time where she accused the Trump campaign, the Russian state, and WikiLeaks of conspiring to interfere with the 2016 election. That all came out during that interview, and it was totally unchallenged. And there was, a lot of the things that she said, some of them were very, very mendacious. Totally mendacious. Like one of the things that she said in the interview was, why don't they ever report about Russia? Talking about WikiLeaks. And WikiLeaks had brought out over 800,000 documents about Russia. And only 1 month earlier, they had brought out a new release, the Russia spy files, which of course Hillary knew about that. But she was pretending to the innocent hobbit Australian viewer that, that WikiLeaks is perennially on Russia's side. They never report about them, and it was just absolutely untrue. And I don't know whether the journalist didn't even realise that it wasn't true. Probably. So incompetence, perhaps. Turning a blind eye. Oh, no, we're getting into trouble if we investigate that. We'll lose our jobs,
Well, exactly. Our career.
It's 11 hours.
This is what it's all about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Maintaining their careers and not rocking the boat, which is what a journalist primarily do, rock a boat.
It's a sad day when your national broadcaster turns into compliant media.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Without even realizing they're doing it, perhaps through lack of research, because I was a bit outraged. Nothing went challenged in that interview, and no mention at all of the Podesta emails, for example. Any good that the Podesta releases had done, it was all just channeled into this destructive act. But you guys must be over that now in America. She didn't lose; she was robbed.
Over that depends of your point of view. The Democrats generally are not over that. No. I think we have Don DeBar, by the way. Kathy, thank you very much for spending half an hour with me and with our audience. And Don DeBar is next up. You are going to interview Don. Let's see if he's online yet. There he is.
There he is.
So Don can unmute his microphone. Then we'll bring him in. Hello, Don. Are you there?
Hello.
Hi, Don. How are you doing? I'm going to bow out of this right now, and I'm going to turn it over to Kathy to interview you, Don. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye, Kathy.
Joe, catch you later on.
Okay.
Fine job as always.
Thank you.
And Kathy, I sent you a friend request on Facebook when you get back on Facebook.
Great. So yeah, you're one of those people that are social. That's great. So I tried to find out something about you today. I didn't have very much time, but I saw something about Radio New York. Tell us something about yourself, Don, so that I can. This is a virgin interview.
I'm a radio journalist, I guess. Every day I produce a 3-hour news magazine and a 30-minute newscast. So Monday through Friday, the newscast airs on terrestrial radio, about maybe 50 stations around the U.S. The news magazine airs mostly on internet, outlets. It's through a group we set up, a bunch of ex-Pacifica producers called Community Public Radio. Our website is communitypublicradio.org. And so we have a group of producers in LA, for example, that used to be at KPFK Radio, that are running an internet station there. And it has an audience comparable to the terrestrial radio station, KPFK. I have a group in New York and DC, ex-producers from WPFW, WBAI, Pacifica, and scattered around the country, some others, and then a lot of terrestrial radio stations carry the newscast. I'd say most notably KGNU in Denver, Colorado, for example. So that's what I do days, and I do political commentary for RT and Press TV and some others, and struggle wherever else I think I can put my back into something where it looks useful.
Yeah, so maybe starting with what's just happening at the moment, to continue the conversation that I started with Joe. What's your feelings on what's been happening in Ecuador in the last couple of days?
Yeah, I saw the a piece at Sputnik about what had happened in the legislature there, and I agree that it seems likely that Lenin Moreno's dirty hand is on this in the back room somewhat. He can't be, he's been over solicitous to the United States since he took office. Now, he got elected because he had Rafael Correa's arms around him. He was supposed to be, he was the heir apparent. He was supposed to continue down that road. The road, the critical road in Latin America and the Caribbean has been, sort of the Fidel Castro, Hugo Chavez route, Bolivarian route, independence, sovereignty, mutual support in those efforts, and the U.S. being the antagonist since Monroe Doctrine in the early 19th century. As soon as he gets in, he does a complete reversal on that, and is trying to be almost outdo Macri in Argentina, who, when he got elected, one of the first things he did was write a $12 billion check to the what do they call them, vulture funds, over some claim that they had against Argentina that no court or anyone else outside the United States recognized at all. It was liquidated in dissolved in the financial problems of Argentina, in the early part of the century. So, when you see Lenin Moreno wanting to kiss the collective behind of Washington and Wall Street, and he sits on the fate of Julian Assange, and then suddenly, sui sponte, some, rumbling start in the legislature to get Julian Assange out of the embassy. Well, it's really not even subtle.
It's not subtle at all.
Yeah.
So, but do you think he was some kind of sleeper cell, or he had a change of heart?
Oh,
and
I don't know. The check cleared the bank. I don't know. We can only speculate. But what we do, we know what he's done, however. His motivation, look, imputing motive is always a fool's errand. We can never know. People themselves don't often know, completely why they do things. And guessing why he's doing it, somehow that may be useful, but I think the most useful thing is we know what he's doing and we got to stop it. And so, money's got to go. That's basically, it's for the people of Ecuador to decide, of course, but I think he's demonstrating to them on a daily basis that that's a fact, and they're going to have to figure out how to do it. The rest of us, what we can do is what we've always done: stand by, in solidarity. Something we can do to help. Okay, fine. And that's it.
Maybe he needs his government to vote against handing him over. Maybe he needs the people's support. Because I have a feeling that $1.1 billion deal, the oil deal, has a lot to do with this, sweetens it. So he can't be seen to have welched on the deal if the people vote against it, right? If there's such a big reaction that he can't actually do that because it's against the law as well.
There's so much that it's so complex too. You've got, all the cleanup that had to be done and has to be done still there from, who was it? Shell was the big polluter there. A couple of the American and British and European petroleum companies, devastated Ecuador like they've done all over the planet, really. Rape, pillage, and, consume monster that walks the earth in, thundering footsteps. So, and the people there, there've been court cases. There's been, rebellions, all kinds of activity around this for many years. It's a tough read for the rest of us, how people will vote on a particular, question that's put to them, because the context is so large. And I don't have my finger on the pulse of the Ecuadorian population, like, say, Gallup or Gannett or whatever the local subsidiary is. And so, I can't say what would be the best way forward because I can't predict what the outcome would be. And then given that, so let's say the people decide against him and this track follows, of activity, of behavior, of, institutional behavior. Well, where does that go? Well, I don't know. We don't know where it's headed. So what's the outcome going to be ultimately, good, bad, or indifferent? It's very complex, beyond my ability to predict. What we can do is let people decide what they want to do themselves and support them and protect them from our government's interference. I mean, to me, my biggest job in terms of interfering in other countries is to keep my government the hell out of there. If I can do that, I'm doing them a favor, no matter what.
You'd be doing the whole world a favor, would you?
Okay. So,
multiple purpose. All right. So what do you think would need to happen so that we at least get it back to the point where he is not in solitary confinement anymore?
Julian. Well, I saw also at Sputnik and at your Facebook page a reference to it. There was this attempt by essentially by the last Ecuadorian deputy foreign minister to sort of deputize Julian as an agent of the foreign ministry of Ecuador, to empower him to go visit the Russian embassy as a deputy minister of Ecuador. So he would have diplomatic immunity and could travel from the Ecuadorian embassy to the Russian embassy, and then presumably, wherever after that. Even if he's just going to the Russian embassy, I assume it's a larger headquarters than, it's a bigger country. I assume they have a bigger flat in London, whatever. But the British government shot that down and basically said, look, set foot outside, we're snagging you. So, I don't think there's that kind of appetite in Lenny Moreno's government anyway to, provide opportunities like that for Julian. But clearly there's an antagonism that's, operating as policy from the British government that's going to have to be factored somehow. And I think, if you look at it strategically, there needs to be some lever against the British government, executing against Julian in whatever can be arranged for him, which means organizing tactically, means organizing some powerful forces in London where all of this would actually physically happen. Even if you're organizing 10,000 people to surround him so he can walk into the middle of a crowd, the crowd walks to the Russian embassy or Heathrow or wherever, and he gets the hell out of there. I don't know how you organize that, and I'm not advocating that someone organize that in case that's illegal. But gee, I think the outcome of that would be one way he would, be liberated. So maybe people might want to investigate that as a possibility.
Well, you're not the first person to say that, because Cynthia McKinney said that as well. Mm-hmm. And she said that if that was happening, she would be there.
Yeah,
she would go.
I know she would too. She'd be calling me from another jail, like she called me from the jail in Rafael last time when she got arrested by the Israelis.
Oh, haven't we all almost had that happen to us?
I keep listening for rumblings in the driveway. You never know.
Yeah, so Cynthia's on later on.
I'm sorry.
Cynthia's coming on the Vigil tonight.
Oh, good. Very good.
Tonight.
Yeah,
she'll be on later.
Yeah.
But go ahead. Go ahead with what you were going to say.
No. This morning, today, tonight, it's so difficult when we're doing something like this where it's global. This is true. This is a remarkable project. I got to hand it to Susie and to all the folks that are involved in this. Joe, you, everyone that's involved. This is an amazing project. Every month now, journalists all over the world, discussing this, helping to organize some, something to get Julian his liberty and to protect the rest of us, help each other, protect the rest of us from that kind of abuse by governments. I think it's a remarkable thing. And I'm really happy and honored to be able to participate in it.
So how long have you been a supporter of WikiLeaks? So pardon?
Since I first heard of it, shortly after it was, public. Here's a bunch of, a trove of documents that have been, taken from the U.S. government that are being released. Really? That they won me over that day. Said, oh, great. It's like you got somebody like the janitor or somebody at the Pentagon has a key to the back door, and at night they, walk in, go into the file room, grab a box of files, run out with them, set up an office somewhere, stick the box on a conference table, and then send out a message. Hey, folks, I got a box of documents out of the Pentagon. Come look through it. I think it's fantastic. What happened with the Vietnam War, the main way people found out the truth to that was somebody did pretty much that in an FBI office, and they found out what was really going on. The back channel conversation about that, and it was a completely different story from what every newspaper, TV station, radio station, talking head, politician, priest, rabbi, shaman, everyone in all the official dum language that they were discussing this thing in, completely different from what the FBI and the Pentagon and everybody were discussing among themselves. And as soon as that got out, boom, there were people in the streets. And so this is a global version of that. And given the nature of information and information management in this period, as opposed to the 60s, where you physically had to put your hands on something to look at it, now, just shoot electrons over, not even wire, over the fiberglass or whatever, or through the air. It's like to the nth power, that kind of power to look behind the curtain at what's really happening. I think things are much worse than they were 50 years ago. And so it's much more urgent that we have the ability to do this. But thankfully we do. And we've got people like Julian and others that are willing to put their neck on the line to make sure that happens. And so, I think that's been my feeling about WikiLeaks since the first day I heard of WikiLeaks.
Mm. Yeah. And I've been thinking since Kristinn Hrafnsson was handed the position of editor-in-chief, the continued persecution of Julian is somewhat pointless in a way, because it's not going to stop the organization. It really shows that there will probably always be a WikiLeaks. God help us if there isn't.
Well, I hope that that's true. And what's said is you cut down one and 1,000 will stand in their place. Whatever version of that you're familiar with. But the bad guys have a perception and some history to validate it that if they go in and say, grab Julian and chop off his head in the public square, it's going to chill an awful lot of those 1,000. That they're going to say, well, maybe we can find another way of doing this struggle, and they quietly exit stage left. So, the fact that it appears that he's almost superfluous now because other people are running the show, I don't know that they necessarily see it that way. Historically, that's not how they see it. So I would have a plan B, namely rescuing him somehow.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's, because the whole purpose of the Unity for J movement is to not let it get to that. Yep. We've been talking about a doomsday clock for Julian, where midnight is where he gets kicked out of the embassy. Yep. And we saw it move forward again a few days ago. But there have been moments when it has been moved back as well.
Right.
Because of the actions of people like us and, outperforming the mainstream media, I've heard, because we are so numerous and so on it, on top of it. And because, the media has been handed over to the people. So it's just up to us to shout out and spread the word. Yeah, absolutely.
More ground for it. See, also, it's not a zero-sum game for Julian and for us with respect to Julian. It's one thing. First, we have to protect him from letting that clock strike 12, whatever, they cart him off to prison or, some horrible fate like that. Another, though, is while he's tied up in the embassy, and this is definitely not lost on the bad guys, what he was doing prior to his having to run to the embassy, he can't do. He's done an awful lot from considering his situation. He did the TV program with RT. He's done a lot of public work. But he's under a severe disadvantage. God knows what he'd be doing if he were at liberty.
Yeah.
And the bad guys are afraid of what he'd be doing, and that's why he's not at liberty. And so, just because we're maintaining the status quo at 5 to 12 or whatever, doesn't mean look, I don't mean we should run ourselves down over it, but, let's liberate him and put him back to work. We're a lot better off if we can do that. And the other side of the coin is if he's stuck there forever, what's he, 60, in his 60s, late 50s, in his 60s, somebody's like my age, a little younger than me. Who wants to spend the end of their life in a closet in an embassy somewhere as opposed to, being able to bounce around the world? And he's done an awful lot of good work, maybe get some recognition, not, awards and trophies, but people every once in a while going, thank you, man. Keep it up. He doesn't even get to do that. He's got to look out the window and see if there's a paddy wagon outside. That's about what he gets to do during the course of a day.
That's true.
Put it in
language. I've always thought that, Julian was always at his most powerful when nobody knew where he was. That's what they're afraid of. And when he used to come into the Frontline Club, on the screen and from an unspecified location, because his point of entry into the net could be anywhere, and such a master of disguise and But the other thing is that it must be very, very hard to accept not having full control over the narrative anymore. WikiLeaks, this amazing journalism, more scoops than the rest of the mainstream media combined. I was saying last time, too much too soon, and it's just like it becomes very unpredictable for so many people, and they don't like that. Just the unpredictability of what WikiLeaks will discover, who will send things to WikiLeaks, because they're not active, they're passive. People send.
That's right. Here it is. Like I said, they just put it on the table in the conference room and hang a sign outside. The file box is in. That's basically it. And then people go do what they do with it, Some people use a piece of paper to light a cigar with or whatever. Others are going to figure out how to, make a new Wankel rotary engine. Somebody else is going to fly something to Mars or whatever. Somebody else is going to take down the U.S. government. Hopefully.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean,
do what they will with it. That's my point. Yeah.
That's right. But it was an Australian journalist, TV presenter, said that the genius of WikiLeaks is that, it kind of is a deterrent to doing the wrong thing, because that anybody in your, or having a safe Dropbox, anybody in your organization could be the one that brings you down.
Yeah. That
so
bad piece of paper might end up on WikiLeaks website. And do you want the world to see that? Yep.
Yes. And theoretically, therefore, people should behave better when they know that this could be, in the news very easily. And it could be the guy next door in the next office could have actually been, raise some moral objection. And, people who work, I know someone who works in Home Affairs, and I can't name names or anything, but, he is morally outraged probably at least 2 or 3 times a week by what happens, what's part of his job. But, he's going to jail if he says anything. We have a world where, WikiLeaks appears people can theoretically denounce the crimes. And then at the same time, there arises the fear of the insider threat, cameras everywhere, surveillance on government employees, keystrokes recorded, everything to prevent the truth from getting out. So there's a bit of a war on both sides, really, isn't there?
Yep. Yeah, it's what you're describing is basically an end to impunity for some people, at least a theoretical end to it. They have to consider, perhaps I don't have impunity, perhaps somebody's going to blow the whistle on me. And, that's a bad thing for me if I'm doing really bad stuff. And we know there are people doing really bad stuff.
Well, that's right. John Pilger said that, when you combine secrecy with impunity, that's when bad things happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, impunity thrives in secrecy. You need it. I mean, people like to do things that, be notorious when they're doing them, but you really need, secrecy is like fertilizer for the kinds of things that impunity protects and shields. So I think that one of the things that we have to keep, in the forefront is looking at the response to things that have happened already with this crack in their official narrative, Brexit, Trump, all these different plebiscites in different places that didn't turn out the way they were supposed to. There are many complexities to these things, but you can see that the response from power is strictly over their loss of control of the narrative, the instruction set narrative. In other words, this is what's going to happen next. And people turn around and say, no, it ain't. And they do something else. That really, I mean, look at the insane reaction of the media in the U.S. to the 2016 election. The Russians somehow with, $80 and a couple of, deposit bottles to be returned, were able to make a strategic media buys in Facebook and turn around the entire Western media narrative, the $2 billion budget, all kinds of other stuff, and put Trump in the White House. Same about Brexit. They said the same thing about Brexit, and a number of other, elections, referenda, whatever around the world. They are furious. They're scared, really. That's what's driving it.
So, he's been asked to testify, Assange. How do you think that will pan out in relation to, do you think that will find some resolution, like if the location, because it wasn't very clear whether Assange was requested to come to the United States, but it was kind of saying that it was well, WikiLeaks said that they were seriously considering the possibility as long as Assange's safety was guaranteed. That sort of has been dropped a little bit. That's disappeared from the news. Do you know anything about that? Because that's happening in your country.
I haven't seen any updates of it. And I didn't really understand it when I saw the reports you're referring to. I understood the reports, but it didn't make any sense to me. You know, you have a number of elements here. One, the enabling case that had him, you know, have to seek refuge in the embassy, you know, from Sweden, right? I believe that's closed. That's gone away, right? There's no prosecution from there. The witnesses have pretty much recanted, and I believe that's the status of it the last time I looked. And so, and there's no official indictment in the U.S. that I'm aware of for, you know, being a whistleblower. And so, you know, I don't know what they could be talking about with him if it's not those two cases. They want to have him over for tea? You know, I don't know. So when I was looking at them talking about interviewing him, I was thinking to myself about what? And I didn't know the answer to that really, and I still don't. So,
well, I mean, I had the impression that it was in relation to the Mueller inquiry. You know, that there was some evidence that he could give there about also. Yeah, we're all speculating, aren't we? But I think isn't it the House Intelligence Committee that wants to hear what he has to say, but we're not even sure about what. That's right.
Right. Don't know. I don't know. I don't know what any. Yeah.
It's going to be a bit quiet.
There's the the whole Russiagate thing. There is that.
It's the Russiagate thing. Yes. So the last time when I was talking to Kristinn, interviewing Kristinn, his mother. There was that theory that, if he went and maybe Trump wants him to testify because he might provide evidence that Trump had nothing to do with any kind of collusion, and Kristinn said, well, who knows? President Trump can change his mind every day. So let's hope it's on a good day. But it's been quite a while now. It's been 2 months. And that hasn't progressed. We haven't had any news at all. It was at the beginning of August where that subpoena came out.
Julian's role in that case would be, to present exculpatory evidence that, Trump did not have contact with Russia over these things, and nor did I act as an intermediary for that because I didn't get him from Russia because I got him from him. He's already said, and they've already said, we're not going to divulge our source. Now, I know they've suggested maybe, some intermediate step, or maybe the source itself is going to say, I was the source, and then, WikiLeaks confirms it. That might be a way of doing it, and then that would be exculpatory evidence for Trump's people. In other words, Russians had nothing to do with what Trump ended up with. It came from Bob over here that gave it to Julian and WikiLeaks, who gave it to Trump or published it or whatever. So, maybe something on the order of that would be what they're talking about doing. But, I don't know. If it's Seth Rich, for example, that was the source, he's dead. So I don't think he's going to come back and say, I now give you permission. So, maybe people feel comfortable with the idea that something I give you in confidence, the confidence is till death do us part, and after that, you're relieved of confidentiality obligation. That may be what they're thinking too, and I don't know. That may well be a reasonable approach to the problem. I don't really know. I haven't given it much thought.
Well, in that case, I'm surprised that they're not indicting or asking for testimony from Craig Murray, because Craig Murray went over there to pick up the material and brought it back over. He's already written about that. Craig Murray's a former British ambassador to Uzbekistan, and great writer and great activist now as well, but and whistleblower as well, famous whistleblower. So Craig has already said that he was the intermediary.
Right. So there you go. So that worked. Yeah.
They ignored it. I know that doesn't fit. That doesn't fit into the narrative. But Craig Murray could be questioned, possibly even in Julian's place. I don't see why not.
Yeah, I mean, there's that too. If let's say someone showed up, for the whole Russian narrative, said, you know what, it wasn't Russia, it was us. Whoever that might be, little green men, South Pago, I don't know, whatever. And here's a trove of evidence, documenting that. They're too invested in the Russia narrative to let it go. Instead they nuke South Pago, whatever, hide the little green men in Nevada or something, and not tell us because they're so heavily invested in it. I don't know. Yeah.
I'm not sure if Mark is here yet.
Yeah, I can't tell.
I think he's on the way in. I got a message to say that he hadn't arrived yet, and we should just keep going. But I was going to
Mark, and that's why I'm asking. What So I don't know. I guess he'll pop up in one of these little windows.
I'm here.
Sorry to come in.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Don. How are you?
Good. I don't see your camera though. You look like a girl in a green dress.
You're too kind. Let's see. What do I have to do here to be visible?
I don't know. That's Susie. That's like her. Looks like a portrait, like from a professional photographer. White background and everything.
There should be some kind of an icon that I'm supposed to.
You got to reboot and come back in.
Oh, I do.
That's what Susie just told us. We've had this issue before.
Okay.
So close the window and then log back in. That's
okay. Will do.
And if you have your Skype open, close it. So there. Anyway, how do I do this? I'm going to put you back here. No. Kathy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah. Yes.
Oh, there you are. Okay. I was going to say we need your picture back up instead of. I guess that's Susie. I don't know. It was a photograph.
That is Susie.
What's that? Huh? Yeah.
Yeah, in the green dress. That's Susie. I was trying to. Yeah, of course her dress is green, but yeah, I thought you knew Susie, so I'm thinking, oh, is he saying that Mark has an image of himself in a green dress?
No.
That you shouldn't be saying that in public. That's kinky. Sorry, I'm just eating some chocolate. It's been sitting in front of me, and I've just been dying to have some. But
No, I guess Mark. Okay, Mark, he needs to reboot his computer. Okay, sorry, I gave him bad information. Okay, I get it too. That's why I remember. In fact, we worked that out when we were playing with this once.
Well, this is going to take a while then. All right.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, man.
All right. Okay.
Do a little little dance and whatnot. Hey, I wonder if I can play. No, never mind. Anyway, what do you do?
Well,
and where are you? You're in Sydney?
Yeah, I'm a lecturer in film, and I teach visual effects and animation, and I'm a hobbyist journalist as well. So I've have had my blog for about 8 years now, thing2thing.com. So it's so much to do with WikiLeaks and whistleblowing and matters of national security, Five Eyes. That's my hobby horse.
So and you get to work with John Pilger you're an amateur journalist, and you get to work with somebody like John. Damn, he's great.
Well, so I made the WikiLeaks tapes. It's a series of films about WikiLeaks.
Really? Cool.
Yeah. And you've got Ellsberg and Chomsky. I couldn't do the Zoom thing. I had to go there. And John Pilcher was in the WikiLeaks tapes, and I've known John since then. That was the first time I ever spoke to him. He can feel very prickly at first, but he's a great man. So he comes back to Australia quite often, and I organise events that he speaks at. I also run a weekly event, or help run it. I'm digital producer of a weekly event called Politics in the Pub. And so we did a live to air event for Julian Assange called The Gagging of Julian Assange on August 9th. And we had as our guests Kristinn Assange and Susie Dawson.
Cool.
I filmed John Pilcher in Sydney, talking in Sydney. He asked me to. So we had forewarning. So in fact, I made it a Politics in the Pub thing. We had 2 cameras, and so we went and did it well. We filmed Pilcher well, and so the sound was really good and everything. And that monumental speech that he gave to beg our Australian Prime Minister to just go, make a call and 15-minute call, do the deal, turn the sort the bail breach thing out. It's normally a small fine, according to Greg Barnes. Especially the charges that it's, not charges, but the cases, the investigation, the questions have been done, cases dropped. And this is just in relation to an Interpol arrest warrant. For what? For what? There's no case left, and it's just so irregular that that's still hanging around. So John Pilcher comes to Australia quite often, and John Pilcher was going to be on this Vigil, except he's filming this weekend. So he's going to be on the next Vigil.
Good.
Hopefully. Yeah. So I did say to Susie, I could pre-record him, although he doesn't like to come in via Zoom. It might just be a phone thing, like with Kristinn. Because both of them, they have to suit. Kristinn especially has to be very, very careful about security.
Yeah.
I mean, she would be. Yeah, she was picked up, she'd be valuable leverage. So her whereabouts and everything, very private, getting her in and all that was all very confidential. So, but John is coming on the Vigil, and he said yes. I asked him, because we're friends, and he said I'd be delighted to come on the Vigil, but then unfortunately had to film this weekend. But you've had Ellsberg on a few times, so I want to see Chomsky on as well.
Yeah, I met Daniel Ellsberg right here in Austin, New York. Actually, he's he was speaking about 10 years ago, a little longer, up at Maryknoll, which is based here, and his brother apparently is connected. He's a brother or some part of one of the religious orders at Maryknoll, the Catholic facility. And so I interviewed him. We chatted it up for a while and stuff. And I have a lot of respect for him. But you, a hobbyist journalist, huh? And you're hanging out with Julian and these people. It's like, I'm a hobbyist golfer. I'm going to go play with Tiger Woods and Jack Nicklaus now. Okay, see you later.
Well, I try to do the same thing as WikiLeaks, and to have that 100% record of accuracy, and to approach it, because I'm an academic. I like to approach citizen journalism as like an academic and cite all my sources. So every assertion I make, I try to provide it, accompany it with the evidence, and I think every journalist should do that. But when John was in Sydney, one of the things that came out of his speech that was kind of the most bitter and really hit the nail on the head. He was talking about Vichy journalism, So the journalists that are gushing. This is I lived in France for 16 years, so I know a lot about the Vichy regime. So they didn't just hand over Jewish people because they had to, but they apparently. They did it with zeal, both in Paris and And so you have these careerist journalists that, you know, are bending over backwards to say bullshit about Julian Assange. And John was denouncing the incredible degree of Vichy journalism in Australia against one of their own citizens. It's bloody shameful.
You know, to call American journalists Vichy journalists, really, it trivializes it, because they are such horrendous creatures here. Vichy is like amateur night for these people. They've been selling wars here for so long. You know, when you sell a war to the Australians, you're selling, you know, they're going to send some troops and some material, but really what you're selling is acquiescence. When you sell it to the American people, what you're doing is selling bloodlust. You know, you got to get them all riled up, so they send the Army and Navy and Marines and Air Force and whatever the hell else they got over right now. Hurry up. And they do it too. It's scary how easily these people are whipped into that frenzy. And I've seen it now a half dozen times over the last 30 years. It scares the hell out of me every time, too.
Well, that's right. I mean, if you look at some of those Guardian journalists like Luke Harding, for example, who's been winning a lot of awards lately, you know, and David Lee writing that terrible book, you know, where they published the password to the cables. I mean, that was a blood on your hands act to do that, to put WikiLeaks in such a terrible situation that there would now be a risk unless WikiLeaks dumped everything and gave people the chance to get away. You know, it was really that night, you know, I was already very, very close to WikiLeaks, and that night was pure hell. Julian crowdsourced it. What am I going to do? You know, and the issue was that, you know, because the password had been published, intelligence agencies knew the names and the whereabouts of people in Afghanistan, for example, and they were in danger. But you know, it's as if doing this kind of thing. You've got Carol Cadwallader, who I think is working for the Guardian, who I think is a really good journalist as well. She's done terrific work with, you know, Chris Wylie, bringing out Chris Wylie and exposing Cambridge Analytica. That was great. And the Channel 4 sting was great as well. And really, that was so much why things happened in the US with the 2016 election. I remember we were getting reports that, you know, Russian trolls were profiling our personality and sending us out propaganda that touched our weak spots. And I'm going, my jaw dropped, because I just done a paper on Cambridge and a presentation on Cambridge Analytica, and that was exactly their MO. But it was happening on a huge scale, right? That was the base. That was what was happening with the Brexit campaign as well.
Yeah,
there were different versions of the ads depending on how highly you scored in neuroticism. You would get, you know, two totally different ads and visuals in relation to the Second Amendment. So I think I'm just looking to see if Mark has come. Oh, there he is! Look, he's just appeared. Hi, Mark. Hi.
Where are you, Mark?
I'm finally here.
You're not on my TV. Where are you?
Just go to gallery view.
Oh, there you are. I just saw him.
Here I am. And it only took, 2 hours for me to get here?
Yeah, it's a long walk.
Yeah. Yeah, well, better late than never anyway. It's nice to see you all.
Yeah.
Okay, Kathy, so I guess you're going to hand it over to me, and I'm going to talk to Mark, and then Mark's going to talk to somebody else in about 30 minutes, and it's great. Thank you. Nice to meet you, and accept my friend request, please.
Well, on that intriguing note, where I just got on to Cambridge Analytica and Brexit, I'll hand it over. Maybe resume that next time, because I know a lot about it, and I'm dying to hear what you have to say, Mark.
Thank you.
I absolutely loved your interview the last time. I thought it was brilliant.
Thanks so much.
First Vigil, yeah. Lovely to see you. And
Nice
thank you very much for inviting me on the show, Joe and Susie. And I'll see you all next time. Bye.
Yep. Okay, Mark. Where are you?
I'm right here.
Oh, there. Hey.
Yeah.
How are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Don. A fellow blacklistee for having appeared on Russia Today.
I don't make the lists. They don't put me on the list. I'm even blacklisted from the blacklist.
Oh dear, you better write to the Open Society Institute and let them know.
Dear Georgie.
Yeah, really.
So, who are you going to be interviewing first when we finish?
Graham Elwood.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So, I don't know. Maybe we could talk. I know you've written extensively about, election fraud, manipulation, all of that. One of the big accusations, of course, against Julian is that the release of the WikiLeaks materials impacted the outcome of the election. Somehow, releasing the truth and having it impact the election is a really bad thing. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit.
Well, I mean, this is such a can of worms. Whenever we talk about the outcome of an election, we have a tendency to interpret the outcome through our own particular partisan lens, or maybe it would be more accurate to say our own tribal perspective. Regardless of my own feelings about the candidates in the 2016 election. And I think my feelings will become clear enough if you don't know them already. There is actually copious evidence that Trump didn't really win in the swing states. I mean, if we just take a cold, objective look at the forensic data, at the exit poll results, and most significantly at the Republicans' desperate and successful efforts to shut down Jill Stein's recount efforts, over which I actually advised her. So I'm kind of intimately acquainted with that whole effort. The evidence tells us that Trump didn't really win in the swing states any more than Hillary won the nomination. Hillary's people stole 11 primaries in 2016. And it's the same kind of evidence. So if we're going to believe the evidence in her case, we can't just ignore the evidence in his, attractive as it may be to tell ourselves that Trump is the people's choice and he fought the Democrats and he's fighting the deep state and all this, which is a meme I don't believe for a minute. I don't think there's any big fight between Trump and the deep state. Nevertheless, I think this is important background, or this gives us some interesting context for the discussion of Julian Assange and what he did or didn't do, and whether or not he's a Russian troll, which I think is a ludicrous argument. And I reckon you guys have already gone over the abundant evidence against that propaganda fantasy. And what I'd like to do with you, Don, I'm responding to something you were saying a moment ago before I vanished for however long that was.
Yeah.
You talked about how heavily invested they are in the Russiagate myth.
Yeah.
And I would go further and say that they are devoted above all to the protection of that myth, to the preservation of that myth. And what this means is that they are doing everything they possibly can to shut out all contradictory voices and all contrary evidence. And this helps us understand what's happened to Julian. I mean, we're rightly focused on his fate. I mean, this is a human rights issue of profound importance. It's also a crucial civic issue that he be released, have his free speech rights restored to him, that he get the medical care he needs, and so on. So of course, the purpose of this vigil is primarily to get some justice for him. But I think what we need to do in order to grasp the true significance of what's happened to him is put it in the larger context of the many ways in which the state, let's call it the state, has been protecting the propaganda narrative ruthlessly for some time now. Okay, so I'm just gonna go through some things that we have to catalog along with Julian's grotesque imprisonment and his having been silenced.
Right before you do that, I want to just say something completely on point. In the same way that they're invested in this narrative, they are so invested in the fiction that the votes are counted legitimately, that even though they would like it if the reports that came out in those states denied Trump the White House, and I believe that's true, they won't mess with the mythology. In other words, they would have to say these things are hackable or crooked or whatever, even though we know what happened in 2000 and 2004. They don't want to go there, and so they're protecting the outcome of that, even though they're not happy with the result.
Well, you have absolutely nailed it, Don. I mean, I've devoted many years of my life to banging my head against the wall of denial over this issue. It is a taboo subject. You cannot talk about computerized election fraud. You can talk about vote suppression. You can talk about the kind of neo-Jim Crow tactics used to disenfranchise people, to make it impossible for them to register. That is a permissible subject. But when it comes to the other, election theft nowadays is a two-step process. It's a kind of 1-2 punch. First, you have to shrink the pool of eligible voters. Okay, so there are fewer voters who can even cast a vote in the first place. That's where all the, the voter ID laws come in, and the voter caging and all the tricks the Republicans primarily have used over the years to shrink the pool of eligible Black voters, eligible Hispanic voters, eligible student voters, eligible Indian voters, and so on. But the necessary second step, and this is what you cannot talk about, is the use of the computerized voting machines and optical scanners, the OpScan vote counting machines, to shave a few votes off here in this precinct, or add a few votes in that precinct. You see, that necessary second step, which is a very clear indication of the utter corruption of the American voting system, that it is based on black box voting systems, computerized voting systems, where there is no open count of paper ballots, and systems that are actually owned by private companies. Okay, right. So the privatization and computerization of the system. This is a taboo subject, like the Kennedy assassinations, right, like King's assassination, like 9/11. You cannot talk about it. And I think that the reason why we can't talk about it is that the CIA has been involved in fixing elections globally forever. Right. And they're involved with this kind of thing. So even in the face of, overwhelming and flagrant evidence that our elections have been fixed, rigged, distorted time and time and time again, anyone who talks about it is branded a conspiracy theorist. So you're absolutely right. We can't go there. Better, we should come up with a cockamamie narrative like Russiagate. Right. And we just look at the evidence that it was probably Republican operatives, working in 2016, and I think working for the Democrats as well during the primary season. Right. So that's absolutely true, and I'm glad you brought that up. But I think now we need to talk about that larger context for Julian's ordeal. I mean, I don't have to tell you, Don, about what's happened to RT. Okay, the silencing of Assange takes place within the same context that has given us first the forced registration of RT as a foreign agent, right? And now, even as we speak, RT is disappearing from major TV systems, cable systems around the country. I think yesterday they vanished from the Spectrum system. I know that last week Comcast dropped them. I would be surprised if RT is visible anywhere except online right now. During the state funeral, that kind of Stalinist state funeral for John McCain, the spectacle ran on all the networks, right? And RT was off the air while that was going on. This reminds us of a crucial fact about propaganda as opposed to mere persuasion or oratory. Propaganda never wants contradiction. It does not want an argument. It does not want disagreement. It wants to dominate our attention absolutely and totally. It does not want to be anywhere near a contrary voice. So RT is a threat, okay? Telesur is a threat. They want to get rid of these things, and they have done so. Now, the disappearing of RT and the silencing of Julian Assange, and I suppose his imminent arrest, has coincided with a broad social media crackdown on many people, most notoriously Alex Jones. Right. And I think how Alex Jones's case is a very interesting one, because I actually believe that Alex Jones is an asset. I think he is a state asset. And I say this because of the way in which he has very brilliantly combined perfectly reasonable, let's call them conspiracies, with lunatic fantasy. Right.
Yep.
In a way that, it's a disinformation technique. And the best example I can use has to do with election theft. He had this guy, Robert David Steele, on his show last summer. Steele is a former CIA officer, right?
I've met him.
Yeah, I'm sure you have, and I'm sure he has a file on you too.
Mm-hmm.
Last July, or it may have been the July before. At any rate, Jones had Steele on as a guest, and he talked about Unrigged, which was an election protection enterprise that Steele was working on with our friend Cynthia McKinney. Right. He came on to Jones's show to talk about election theft, and he sounded perfectly rational. I mean, Unrigged is probably the most radical election protection program out there. And it was refreshing to hear him talking about it. And it was nice to see Alex Jones taking that issue seriously. But 2 days later, Jones had Steele on again. And this time, Steele talked about how NASA is running a child sex slave colony on the planet Mars. I'm not making this up.
Well, and that's just enough disinformation, because we know that colony is on Venus.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, exactly. Mars was the tip-off. Yeah, and Jones didn't say, "What are you, out of your mind?" He said, "What are you, nuts?" He said, of course, yeah. NASA has those. I mean, don't even get me started on space travel, because that's another conspiracy theory. As we're approaching the 50th anniversary of what didn't happen in 1968. Anyway, I digress. Social media, I think that Alex Jones has functioned as a figure that they could very showily censor. Right. Now, let's pretend that Jones is for real. I think it's outrageous that the entire liberal media and just about every progressive I know has either been silent on Jones's silencing or applauded it. Why? Because he advances hoax theories. He advances conspiracy theories, I guess, about Sandy Hook. Right. I mean, whatever he has to say, I can't understand anybody accepting his exile from all the major social media platforms in the country. Right. And it seems to me that if the ACLU was an organization, worthy of its reputation, they would have been all over that in a minute, right? But they have now declared themselves primarily devoted to a social justice agenda, and they will therefore not take the part of any victim of free speech suppression who is not on board with that agenda. So the days when they defended the Nazis, when they marched in Skokie, right, those days are over, right? Go ahead.
Skokie was an interesting moment in their history because there's also the Smith Act.
Oh, yes.
They had ideological tests before where they sided with power. And I'm not so sure Skokie was in opposition to power, if you think about the history of this country. So,
well, no, that's true, too. Well, speaking of legislation, I think it's appropriate to note that the Smith-Mundt Act, which was passed in the 40s, outlawing State Department propaganda beamed at American citizens.
Yeah.
That under Obama, the Smith-Mundt Act was repealed.
Right.
And this reminds us of an earlier presidential step that didn't get as much publicity, but that's when Ronald Reagan came out with Presidential Directive 12333, which actually made it legal for the CIA to direct its propaganda at American citizens. Not that they weren't doing that all along anyway.
Right.
But the important point here is that even the lip service to legality and to the protection of American democracy from state propaganda engines, even that pretense has now disappeared. The government is now perfectly free to beam its propaganda at us 24/7 through every conceivable outlet. So that what we're talking about here, with the silencing of RT and the exile of Alex Jones and many other dissidents, including I think you and me, from social media sites, campaigns of vilification against people like Eve Bartlett and Vanessa Beeley over the Syria story, slanderous articles about them in The Guardian and other liberal outlets. And all of this, I think it has been, how can I say this, refined somewhat and facilitated by the use of identity politics memes. I noted last time I was here talking in Julian's defense that it's striking that Chelsea Manning got a great deal of support from progressives and liberals, and I think she deserved the support. Right. But I believe that their comparative silence on Julian's plight, I think, had to do with the fact that Chelsea Manning is transgender, and I don't believe that she would have had as much support if she weren't. I think people found her case poignant for that reason. They were much less interested in the bravery of what she did when, as Bradley Manning, she released all that material about the military in Iraq and so much else. And I think that this has hurt Julian. I think that the smear campaign that came out of Sweden was based on kind of identity politics.
It's a rape charge.
A rape charge, exactly. So this, this kind of connects us to the Me Too movement. Yep. And we should also note, that Russiagate has entailed a great deal of social justice rhetoric aimed at Putin. It wasn't long ago that Hillary Clinton, that stalwart champion of inclusion and diversity and democracy and peace, was talking about how Putin is a homophobe, right? Which is a kind of tacit suggestion that, we really ought to drop some bombs on Russia because he's such a bigot, At any rate, I think free speech is in serious trouble in this country on all the grounds that we've covered in the last half hour, and others that I haven't had a chance to get to.
Yeah, we got Graham here, so I'm going to have to bow out. My parting shot, at the same time that Reagan did that, he also abandoned the fairness doctrine. So the rest of us had no standing whatsoever to say, hey, look, how about some divergent position from the propaganda you're giving us? And then, of course, when they did the recent rule change to allow them to beam it right at us, they signed basically a joint venture agreement with, of all people, an exiled Russian oligarch, Mikhail Khodorkovsky, who partners now with Radio Liberty and all of those outlets.
Right. Well, just wait for the rollout of 5G and the emergence of the Internet of Things, when we'll be getting propaganda from our toaster ovens, and our vacuum cleaners.
Holographic CIA agent next to you at all times.
Oh, is that who that is? Yeah, I was wondering who that guy is.
Mark, take care, brother. Nice talking with you.
Nice talking to you. Bye-bye. Okay, now I'm supposed to take over as MC. Is that right? Yes. Graham, are you there? He seems to be muted.
Can you hear me?
I hear you now.
Okay.
And I can see that you see me. There I am in the background.
Yes.
Nice to see you, Graham. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. You know, it's a pleasure and an honor to be able to talk to a comedian whose work doesn't come from the CIA's comedy desk.
You know, I've been trying to get on that CIA comedy tour because I hear it pays well, but they just don't seem to want to hire me because I keep saying the same thing JFK said, which is they need to be shattered into 1,000 pieces and scattered into the wind.
Yeah, you and Bill Hicks.
Yeah.
I hope the resemblance ends there, I have to say. So, talk to us about Julian. You and I haven't had a chance to talk before, and I know you've been a very staunch advocate in his behalf, as have I. So it's again a pleasure to be able to join you here today. But what are your thoughts at the moment on what seems to be his imminent seizure by the authorities out of that embassy?
Well, it's pretty insane to me. And I mean, something that you touched on a little bit with regard to Alex Jones. There was a handful of actually progressive people that defended him, Jimmy Dore being one of them, Glenn Greenwald, but no one in the mainstream corporate media for sure. And while, you know, I like somebody like Alex Jones, I don't agree with him 99% of the time. The fact that they can come, you know, block him, and then what they've done with Abby Martin of Empire Files, and it's just indicative of what they're doing to Julian Assange is the fact that, and I say this all the time. I say this on these vigils all the time, and I say this to other people who aren't paying as close attention, that if they can do this to any of us. If they can do anyone, if they don't like your speech, man, they can jail you. If you're a threat to the power structure, the you know, the oligarchs and the kleptocracy that we have here in America, to the military industrial complex, then they will find whatever means possible to take you down. And they have two tactics. They either smear you, that's if you don't play ball, or they buy you. So if they buy you, then you get to go on MSNBC or CNN or Fox or whatever, and you get to spew their propaganda, and you cater it to the right side or the left side, depending on what professional wrestling character they're having you play that day. So it's kind of alarming. And the people, you know, you were also talking about they'll use whatever smear tactics they can. Whatever smear tactics are available to them, they will use it. They don't care. Whatever, you know, and they're monitoring everybody, so they know they have, you know, that they have, and having talked to Susie Dawson about Vault 7, they have the analytics. They know that, oh, there's a rise in people talking about socialism. So now they're going to come back down on it the way they did. And they're going to equate socialism with Soviet era communism and say that those are the same things. And this is the tactic that they use. And once you understand that it is just about their money and their control, and everything else is theater, everything else, like they want us split up as red state, blue state. And definitely. I watch MSNBC, I watch Fox. They want that sort of, it's the same thing as I'm a Yankee fan, I'm a Red Sox fan. They just want us in that capacity because it distracts us from the fact of what they're doing. Julian Assange is a political prisoner. There's no other way to put it. He's a political prisoner just because, I mean, he's kept in a building. He can't see his family. He has no contact with the outside world. Explain to me how that is not solitary confinement. So it's really, and the fact that the team, they've been so successful at keeping everybody in their tribe and their team, then, like you say, they accuse him of rape. So, social media, he is guilty. He's a rapist. And even though he says, I would gladly, when he said, I would gladly stand trial. I'll stand trial, but you just can't extradite me. They wouldn't agree to that. It's like, right. That's an innocent man says that. Somebody accused me of something I didn't do, I would absolutely want a trial.
Yeah. Well, just as a point of information, those tuning in may be interested to know that there's an absolutely devastating analysis of that whole Swedish case by Celia Farber, a journalist who has a site called Truth Dig. And that, as far as I'm concerned, is the definitive work absolutely nailing that case. There's nothing to it. There's no evidence for it. It was a political hit job, right? Meant, as you say, to silence him. And all of this, you know, they sort of provide cover for themselves by constantly accusing Russia of being the one that's always silencing critics, killing journalists. I mean, the last I looked, Michael Hastings was a journalist who bought it suspiciously, right? Nobody has said anything. And I want to add, too, that you nailed it when you noted that what they want above all is to keep us divided, right? The strategy of divide and conquer, it is an imperial strategy that goes back to the Romans. The British were very good at it. The British taught our CIA the key assassinations of the 60s, Jack Kennedy, Malcolm, Martin Luther King, and Bobby Kennedy, all four of them had recently turned in a more inclusive direction toward a more radical politics, actually uniting the country, right?
Oh.
So let me just very quickly say they were well past the point of being bribed, and they were well past the point of being slandered. I mean, they were murdered,
you bring up
right?
an excellent point, which is the minute Malcolm X and Dr. King, you know, Malcolm was very critical of Dr. King. And then when Malcolm X, if you read the autobiography, you know, when the last chapter, Muslims of all different ethnicities and races together, he started to come, him and Dr. King started to kind of come more together. Dr. King, and of course executed. When Bobby Kennedy started to realize, you know, he started just do whatever you got to do to win, you know, win. And Bobby Kennedy started to realize this isn't right. The speeches of Bobby Kennedy and all those speeches from Dr. King, where he's talking about socialism, where he's talking about why are we spending money in Vietnam when we could be helping, there's poor people here in America. And Bobby Kennedy was starting to realize that. It's not a coincidence that then they were all executed.
That's absolutely right. And that's what our masters absolutely don't want. And as you note, I think we're living in a moment of unprecedented division, right? I think Trump is a gift from God, or a gift from our oligarchs at any rate, because he has violently, but also of making, and I know you'll appreciate this, of moving countless liberals and progressives to regard the CIA and the FBI as our saviors, as our heroes. I hear this. I feel like evidently not.
They don't know. I mean, they don't know the history from 2 years ago when they were screaming at the, you know, when Comey reopened up the investigation against Hillary,
right.
They hated the FBI. Now they love the FBI. Like it's on the left are calling Tulsi Gabbard an Assad apologist because she doesn't want another ridiculous regime change war. She's an Iraq combat vet who has said, I had friends that did change war. She's called an Assad apologist by Howard Dean. I mean, it's like the right goes so far right, and then the Democrats follow them. Like it's that now the Democratic Party is in favor of war. It's in favor of the FBI. It's in favor of all of these insane things. It's like Susan Sarandon is vilified by the left.
How do we even call them the left, right? Is it
right
because of identity politics? People think that's left wing. I don't believe it is. I think it's actually right wing because it's fundamentally based on by a falsehood, right? I mean, that's closer to Hitler than it is to Marx, as far as I'm concerned.
I mean,
you know?
it's insane, and I, you know, a lot about Trump. I I don't like, but a lot of people are getting engaged in politics, and I think, you know, the protests we're seeing and the strikes and everything. Hello.
Oh, hi, I'm back. I'm back in because the stream's breaking up.
Okay, well, you're welcome to join us.
So I think the fact that more people are getting involved, I'm hoping that that's the thing that is going to wake Americans up. There's a famous picture that that started circulating after the first Women's March that said, if Hillary would have won, we'd be at brunch right now. And I was like, so many people went, that's so indicative. Obama was, you know, putting Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden and Julian Assange, you know, ostensibly behind bars in matter of speaking. So I'm hoping more people wake up. I'm hoping more people realize that, you know, that identity politics just really gets in the way of anybody hearing any truth, you know, and I would like to see it. I'd like to be you're supporting the Wall Street, you know, and you're supporting the corporate state from imprisoning people like Julian Assange. The thing is, so he's a Soviet spy. All he's done is taken information that whistleblowers gave him and put it out. How that makes him some sort of Putin puppet.
Well, he's obviously not, but it is useful to cast him that way, not only to silence an important dissident voice and a genuine journalist, but also to feed the war propaganda narrative against Russia. You know, it all works through your hope that people will wake up. But while they're fixating on, you know, which pronoun to use to refer to your own gender and stuff like that, the war machine is out of control, right? Economic inequality is more egregious than it's ever been. And then there's a whole litany of other horrors that we really definitely have to deal with. And the only way to do it is for us to talk to each other, right? Is to discover we the people, right? How do we do that? That's a good question, you know. I'm wondering, are there, this may be a naive question, but are there some political conservatives who have joined us in support of Julian's?
Yeah, I've talked to some even on this vigil a couple months ago, and that's the thing that is so amazing to me is everyone's starting to kind of realize, you know, that this connects everybody. I mean, and I think people have to look at the bigger issue here, which is the war machine will say and do whatever it has to do to keep going. And every time they tell us they can't afford, you know, Medicare for all, college tuition, $infrastructure a year to spend on war. You have $1 trillion. We outspend the next 7 countries combined. You know, what I try to do is, you know, I'm very left-leaning in many of my views, and I live in Los Angeles where there's a lot of neoliberals running around here. I try to wake them up to the fact, you know, that Goldman Sachs has been in every presidential cabinet since Reagan. So just know that's who's, you know, and I many people are unhappy with what Trump that first put some of these laws in place. So this idea that one party is better or worse than the other is sort of, you know, the healthcare industry gives to both parties equally, and both parties, you know, support the war machine. They vote for these. And I really want people to try to connect the dots.
Yeah.
You know, Julian Assange threatening the war machine. You know, Chelsea Manning was threatening the war machine. She was saying, "Why are we in Yemen? We're we're finally getting a little glimpse of conversations about Yemen in the mainstream media, and some politicians are finally starting to go, hey, wait a minute, after that bust of 44 Fist, we're finally starting to wake up. So I don't know, I try to be positive, but looking where Julian's at, and they're about to get him or starve him to death or whatever their tactic is, their end game. I gotta look for
we're
hope.
obliged to. We have no choice but to do that, because the alternative is despair and passivity. But I do think people have to face the fact that our most fundamental freedoms are if not gone already, at grave risk of disappearance. That includes the right to vote. And I no longer laugh off the claims of people on the right that there's a move to restrict gun rights. I've been reading around. I was quite interested to see that in 1943, George Orwell wrote a very powerful piece for the Evening Standard, the British newspaper, plays in protecting democracy, right? Now, he wrote this in anticipation of a possible invasion of Britain by the Nazis. And he made the point that, that gun on the wall of the farmer, that gun on the wall of the working man's apartment is a symbol of, but I mean, I can understand the concern of some principled conservatives with the need to reassert the part that gun rights have played in the history of American democracy, bearing in mind that slave owners protecting their status. But what I'm saying is that the entire apparatus of rights that were enshrined in the Constitution to make sure that the American Republic could survive, those rights are at serious risk now of being destroyed. And it's because, war serves empire, right? Republics cannot survive in an atmosphere of constant war, which empowers the executive, it saps the treasury, it means the destruction of our wish. Today is basically where Eugene Debs was during World War I, right? When they got him, used the Espionage Act to put him in prison for talking against that war. Julian Assange is the Eugene Debs.
Yeah, and
today.
he got almost 1 million votes from prison in a country that had, I don't know, about 100 some million people in it, 150 million maybe at the time.
Exactly.
Which is pretty powerful. And I want to say this too, that where I always follow the money, I always follow the profit. And while I don't want to see rights taken away, the gun lobby profits from mass shooting. They sales go up. So I always am like, I don't know that they're so much wanting to protect rights as they want to fill their own bottom line, but we're not here to debate the gun legislation. But I will say that I agree on the sense that wherever there's money to be made is another egregious crime, in my opinion. And that came into place in the 80s, where we always need an enemy or a criminal. So we need a war on crime. We always use that to war on crime. The streets are unsafe, so we got to build private prisons. We need a war on drugs. Drugs, in my opinion, calls it a disease. Right. So we're not having a war on diabetes or anything like that. So it's really whenever the bottom line is threatened and the control and power structure is threatened, then that's what they're going to do. I mean, again, going back to Vault 7, to monitor and control the entire planet. That's insanity. And when the thing too, going back to what you were saying about, everyone's like, oh, Russia. All right, let's investigate Russia. But I just want people to know all the elections we have. You know how many democratically elected officials that wouldn't let American business? I mean, Smedley Butler does that book War is a Racket. He talks about that famous speech that was put around on the internet, which was, he said, I was a button man, I was a muscle man for the American corporate interests. Going back to the 1800s on MSNBC, and they said Chris Hedges has a show on RT, which is a Russian-funded network. They always point that out. That's fair. That's a fair thing. Then you know what we should all do? What Chris Hedges should do is go, thank you for having me on MSNBC, which of course is funded by oil. Because that's what I point out to my friends who are like, a friend of mine, a very smart guy, said, well, Russia, they're listed as a foreign agent. And he goes, they're funded by Russia. I said, oh, watch. ABC, Fox, I don't care where it is. Look who's buying ad time. That'll tell you who is dictating what can and cannot be said on that channel.
Well, we don't.
So we don't have a free
as one who's been on RT many times, as well as, not so recently, a number of the major American channels. It's only the American channels that make you go through a pre-interview where they basically get what you're going to say to make sure it's okay with them. RT calls and so on, and I've often disagreed with them. I mean, they can handle an argument, which, as I noted before, propaganda outlets don't want arguments. They want assent. They want a choir to sing the same song, basically. And that's abduction by the U.S. government.
The media outlets should be screaming at the top of their lungs that a journalist, that a guy that's just putting information out there is in jail. I mean, like they should be, but that's what they do. I mean, they play the game like they always, well, let's play both sides of it. So they always have, Bill Nye or somebody like that is saying climate change, 97% of all scientists, and then, well, let's get the other side of it. And that's how they think they're being fair and balanced, when the reality is, if you had 100 doctors in front of you, 97 of them said that smoking causes lung cancer, and then there's three doctors that said smoking does not. By the tobacco industry, you'd question those three doctors, and you would see how 97% of all doctors are saying climate change is happening. We need to do something about it. But that's the thing with the corporate media in America. They want to push certain agendas. It's amazing how they really want war. I mean, you saw Brian Williams practically laugh himself when he saw those rockets go to Syria a year ago.
Well, it's been, I think, the American media has always been basically pro-war, but something really changed with the Gulf War in 1991, when they were all basically functioning as an explicit PR arm of the Pentagon, and from that moment on, it's been pretty much the same, I mean, they never again would they allow the media to get even that critical of the war as they were of the war in Vietnam.
Well, also the images. Right? They realized from Vietnam, every night everybody came home in the 60s and 70s and sat around the dinner table and watched American GIs get killed and Vietnamese civilians get killed, and it was graphic and horrifying. Vietnam documentary that's on Netflix. It's very graphic and shows you how awful war is, And so after that, they went, nope, media blackout. And when the Gulf War happened in 90, or what was that, 90 or 91, I think, 91, boom, and they're just like, they just basically played the Star Spangled Banner and showed how great our rockets were, and they controlled every aspect of the media in the 80s. Yeah. So media outlets used to be independent. You had independent newspapers, you had independent radio and TV channels, and then they started buying it all up, and they run and control everything.
And that's where we are now, and that's why it's left to us to foreground Julian's plight, because it's not going to be happening. It's not going to be happening in our liberal press. So I'm getting a signal from Susie that our time is finished. Now it's your talking to you, Graham.
Thank you so much.
Hope we can do it again soon.
Absolutely.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Before we switch over here, I will just see if we can briefly take a technical break and see if we can sort out an issue we're having with the audio. So just stand by and I'll cut the screen briefly and we'll see if we can sort it out. You've got Cassandra